in it, but let's give Greg a go. Have you worked with any of your heroes, Greg?
Well, the thing is, Nick, normally when you say to people, have you worked with any of your heroes, you think about a young person who fell in love with their musical heroes and heroines, and then they meet them in later life because they end up in the music business or TV or whatever. But because I literally started 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, and my record collection at school, the bulk of it comprised Roxy Music, Yes, Bowie, Donovan, bit of Led Zeppelin, quite eclectic, but not very disco and funky. And I have to admit now, because it's long gone, and I'm sure that the manager of Gerrard's Cross, W.H. Smith, is long gone and dead. But the beginnings of my record collection, I think, were 4 albums that I stole from W.H. Smith's. I went along the racks and I hid them under a big jacket and got home. And the funny thing is, every time I put them on when I went to boarding school, I just didn't enjoy them so much because I knew they were stolen. And it put me off thieving for the rest of my life. I should have.
Remember what they were? Those 4.
But no, well, it was part of that early collection that I just mentioned, and the rest of the collection was made up of mail order from Virgin Records, Richard Branson's first foray. And I remember them coming to school in a package, being so excited as we fired up the Garrard SP25 Mark II and warmed up the valve amplifiers in the school prefect's common room in the attic of the boarding house, and then used to pump out until the housemaster ran up and said, "Will you turn it down? The juniors are trying to sleep." Anyway, so I started at EMI Records, and very quickly I met a whole load of artists, including Natalie Cole. I worked on This Will Be, which went to #4. I took her to Paris to do a TV show there. Bowie, I was really infatuated with as a kid. I just thought he was fantastic, as well as Roxy Music. And I never worked with Bowie, but while I was at RCA Records, Bowie was in and out of the building a few times, and I brushed past him. And I now am the proud owner of a special limited edition colored vinyl, autographed and numbered set of his albums, which I have to keep hiding because my 4 children are regularly laying claim to my nice pieces of vinyl and my lovely jukebox. Now I've got one AMI Continental Mark II, which is in working order. And all 4 of my children tell me that when I'm dead, they want it. And they also have a very good reason as to why they want it. So my 3rd daughter's a singer. She's a jazz singer, jazz pop singer. Thank you, John. She's obviously been hit like most artists with the lack of gigs, lots of gigs cancelled this year, but she's got a really good voice. And she says that she deserves the jukebox because she's a musician. But my eldest daughter works for Amazon Music and used to work for Universal Music. And she says she deserves it because she's in the music business. So I've said, well, I'll chop it in 4. And then you'll have to get together and piece it together. So that's a bit of a diversion, but meeting my heroes. So Bowie, I never worked with. But what I did is, as I worked my way up in the music business, there were some artists that I really enjoyed working with. I wouldn't say that I felt that they were my heroes, because the one thing I learned really early on is that as talented as Adam Ant was, or Diana Ross, or Michael Jackson, who I worked with, without us lot, they were nothing. I mean, you can't make music and expect to be a superstar unless you've got your promotion, your marketing, your record company, your journalists, your TV producers and directors. So I never really held them in awe where I would kowtow to them. I mean, yes, I treated them with the respect they were due, but I met, like we all have, plenty of arsehole artists acting in a very, very inconsiderate way. And there were times where I just knock it back. And funnily enough, 9 times out of 10, when you knocked it back, they apologized and realized they were being a total tit and got on with what needed to be got on with, you know, instead of taking all the green M&Ms out of the bowl in the VIP dressing.
And puppies.
You know, shut up. I did have Bruce Springsteen I was really fond of, and there was a lovely story that Dave plays into, because a mate of mine, Chris Chappell, who was on one of the Rocktails with me, I invited him on. He used to work for The Who and their management company, Bill Kerbishley, in Wardour Street. And he walked into my office in Soho Square once, and I just had my hair cut, sort of short and spiky. And he walked in, just barged open the door, said, "Hello, man, I love your fucking haircut. Where'd you get it?" And we became lifelong friends. After the Who petered out, he took himself to America and landed a job working with Bruce Springsteen and his management team, John Landau. He was a huge fan. I mean, he was one of the first big fans outside of the US who was waving the flag for Bruce. Now, at the time that Bruce was about to arrive in the country, we sat in a marketing meeting that Dave was in, and everybody started plotting about how to infiltrate Bruce's camp, because he was so pissed off with what CBS had done by overinflating, you know, God is coming to Britain. He hated that, didn't he, Dave? He didn't like that big, don't big me up. I'm a working class geezer that makes music. I don't want to be treated like a god. So he was coming back into the UK and he had refused to do any promotion whatsoever. He was just going to do the gigs. And of course, to a record company, that's like a wasted opportunity. So someone had the idea that Dave would go incognito as head of artist relations and impregnate himself into the camp with completely, you were to be let off the leash, weren't you? I mean, remember, no mobile phones, but Dave, just get in there. And for God's sake, try and get him to do a whistle test or do anything. So we've just had this meeting. And then literally 2 nights later, my friend Chris calls up and says, do you fancy coming out? I said, oh, well, I'm a bit tired. Why? What's going on? He said, well, I'm going up to meet Bruce and I'm going to take him to the cinema. So I said, yes. So I jumped in my car, drove up to meet Chris at the hotel. We picked Bruce up. We took him to the Notting Hill Gate Cinema and we watched the Howard Hughes biopic. So we go to the cinema, we get some ice cream and popcorn, we watch the movie, and then Bruce says, guys, are you hungry? Yeah. So we went up to Soho, we had an Italian, we had some veal, a scallop or something. And then we dropped Bruce back at the hotel. We were sitting in the lounge, hanging out. No one was bothering him. Bruce said, oh, I'm just going to go upstairs for a little while, guys. Well, after about half an hour, Chris said, I wonder what he's up to. So Chris buzzed up and he said, Bruce, are you okay? He said, yeah, man. He said, he's come up. It's a bit embarrassing. We came up into the room and there he was scoffing 2 hamburgers. We just had dinner. He said, I'm sorry, guys. I just got to get my burger fix. So we'd had a full slap up dinner, but he needed a couple of burgers. Yeah, anyway, literally the next day, I bowl up at work. We have another meeting and more discussion happens around how we're going to smuggle Dave into the Bruce camp. And Bruce at dinner had talked about how he was completely against all this shit, even though he knew I was at CBS. I said, don't worry, I won't dob you in, Bruce. I sat in the meeting completely conflicted because I said, and I didn't work on Bruce, I was in disco still. So everyone was talking about how this was going to work. I said, can I just say something? I said, I don't think that's going to work. He'll sniff it out and it's just going to be really difficult for Dave. And everyone looked at me and said, well, how the hell would you know? I said, well, I had dinner with him last night and took him to the cinema. And everyone went, what the fuck? I said, yeah, but it wasn't me. It was my pal, Chris Chappell, who's a friend, and that's it. But I'm telling you, he's not going to go for it. And I can't remember, Dave, what you then did.